Welcome to Hope Talks Podcast, Conversations for Families with Special Needs. This is a space where we talk about challenges that families face, and we provide information and resources that bring hope, not just for today, but also for the future. I'm your host, Julie Cadman. I'm co-founder of Healing Complex Kids and the co-author of Pathway to Hope Resource Guide for Special Needs. One of the toughest conversations that families that have children with special needs face is talking about healthy relationships and sexuality. It's a really tough thing, whether your child is neurodivergent or neurotypical. Today I'm joined by Susan H. Rogers with Pereira Counseling and Consulting. She is an expert in neurodivergent sexuality and helps provide information that helps families as they figure out how to approach the subject and how to help their children. Welcome, Susan. I'm so glad you're here today.
Thank you, Julie. I'm so glad to be here.
Now, let's start with the very first question, which is you talk a lot about education as prevention. What does that mean, education as prevention?
That's a term that I came up with the work that I was doing with families and with young people who are neurodivergent. There is a huge number of people that are sexually abused. The number of people who are neurodivergent are involved with sexual abuse, and due to vulnerability, lack of education. And I would say that lack of education is the primary reason why this work is needing to be done. People have often thought that folks with who are neurodivergent, folks with disabilities, don't need to have sexuality education. People won't have relationships. They won't have partners. They won't be considered to have children if they choose to do that. So there's been a lack of education for people who are neurodivergent.
So it's almost like if a parent says, well, I don't need to teach this to my child, they're turning a blind eye to potential abuse, is what I'm hearing.
Yes, and oftentimes that's driven by fear. Fear that their children are going to be going out in the world and they won't have any protection with them. They won't have people to guide them. And it's a very, very scary topic. In the chapter that I wrote for the book that you just referenced, I talked about watching my own child go down the driveway on her tricycle. And in my emotional state of feeling very vulnerable, I thought, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? She was literally just going a few feet and I was right there. But that feeling of I'm sending my child out into the world, and then having a child or children who are neurodivergent, there's so many additional layers to that of being scared, and also parents not knowing when to teach their children, how to teach their children. Are there any other resources that are available for them? So that's the work that I do.
So for a parent who is hearing this and they're thinking, oh my gosh, you're right, I need to do something, what do you recommend? What would be the first step?
So what I would recommend is to think first as a parent, what does my child need to learn? What do I want them to learn? What are my values? What are our family values? How are we teaching our children or our child family values? Excuse me. And then enlisting the support of others, enlisting resources, enlisting curricula that's available. One of the most wonderful curriculum that I have found is Elevatus training, ELEVATUS. I'm a sexuality education trainer for them, and Catherine McLaughlin, the founder of Elevatus, along with the Green Mountain Advocates, which is Nothing for Us Without Us, is an amazing wealth of information and resources. And I'm using that as an example, but there are many other programs too that parents can access. Parents need to talk with each other. And oftentimes, again, there's isolation and parents don't know where to start, and maybe there's some embarrassment, or I should know this and I don't know this. So first thinking, running ideas by other people, enlisting the support of your school district and looking for resources in the community or nationwide that can be helpful.
So Susan, what is the difference between sex education and sexuality education? Can you explain that to us?
Yes. So Julie, I'd like to start with what's the difference between sex and sexuality. Sex is the physical act of sex in all its forms. Sexuality encompasses so many more dimensions. It encompasses friendships. It encompasses the idea of intimacy, of connections, of relationships, as I said, of knowing who I am as a person, sexual being, or not thinking of myself as a sexual being. But I want to say that all people are sexual beings. We're all born a sexual being and we all die a sexual being. So that's the difference. It encompasses, there's something called the 16 dimensions of sexuality, which talks about public and private, body awareness, body parts, risks, vulnerability, gender identity, so many more aspects of sexuality that is, sex includes that, but sex is like a separate entity. That's the physical act.
And you said something really important, public and private, and that's really important, I would think, for all of our kids, but especially our neurodivergent kids, to understand what's public and what's private.
Absolutely. That's something that I work on so much with the people that I see. And I want to just go back to something. When you introduced me, PRAR Consulting and Counseling and Consulting, PRAR stands for to prepare in Latin. And when I started my practice, I felt very strongly that I needed to help and support people and families prepare for life in the healthiest way possible so that people are understanding of what we just talked about and not getting involved in the legal system either as a victim or a perpetrator or both.
That's one of the things I think when I first heard about you as well, because you sometimes have to go to the legal system because someone has done something inappropriate that they didn't understand.
Exactly. So that's why, again, going back to tying up the loop with education. Everybody has a right to education. And the information is the same, but it's taught in a different way. So when I was teaching health education in the school district that I formerly worked in, the information was, again, it was the same. People needed to know the same information, but we taught it in a different way to promote understanding and communication.
So that's actually a question. How do you teach it differently to promote this for the neurodivergent versus neurotypical? What are you doing differently?
So what we're doing is, first of all, recognizing that we have to see people at their chronological age. And so if I'm working with somebody who's, I'll say, 35 years old, I'm not going to bring out a book that's really intended for a toddler. I'm going to produce and provide materials that are respectful of what their chronological age is. Given that, I still have to take into account their developmental age, a person's developmental age, and what their what the conditions are and what their disability may be. A long time ago, I heard David Hingsberger, who was a sexual advocate and a wonderful, wonderful educator, sexuality education person, and very sadly he died just a few years ago. But he talked about that everybody communicates. We all communicate, but we all communicate in different ways. Some of us are verbally fluent, some of us aren't. Some of us produce thoughts, in a very natural, easy way. Some of us don't. As a parent, as an educator, as a therapist, it's my role to understand how a person communicates and communicate with them in that manner so that they're understanding.
So like you said, developmental and also chronological, and trying to do the two together.
Absolutely.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yes, absolutely. And that's one of the most important things, and to be respectful of people. So asking, how is the information different? We might use a lot of visuals in our work. We might, in the training program that I do, Elevatus training, it's 22 weeks of classes, lessons, and we're actually just going to be starting that in another few weeks again. I have a co-facilitator, and we do our program hybrid model. So I'm at the Arc of Oakland County, he's on Zoom, and people can choose to either be on Zoom or come in person or do both. So each lesson is different, but it also circles back to what had been learned in previous lessons. So we reinforce and make connections.
And you're building.
Building blocks, absolutely, and building the foundation, absolutely. Okay. And that's what's needed, and that's education. I want to say one more thing about that, like talking about public and private and body parts. People and young people don't use correct terminology or the medical terminology for body parts. And we go through what slang words we use for various body parts. But we also want people to understand that, to be able to either identify visually or verbally or both certain body parts, so that if, let's say, somebody is being assaultive with them, they can identify that. And that's, again, part of the prevention and education. Yes.
Love that. So a lot of parents are going to say, what do I do to keep my child safe? What would you say?
My answer to that is, again, not to sound very redundant, but provide education. And if, as a parent, you are feeling ill-equipped to do that, then to go to the resources and get the support for other people. There's no shame in that. When my kids were growing up, I asked probably everybody I knew, is this okay? Should he be doing this? Should she be doing that? What's wrong? And it was, I needed that reassurance that as parents, we're all going to make mistakes. So don't be so harsh on yourself as a parent. That's one thing I would say. Every parent makes mistakes.
So piggybacking on that, what is the biggest mistake that you would see families make when it comes to teaching about sexuality?
One aspect of that I see is that sometimes parents feel, if I don't expose my child to this information, then they won't know about it and they won't need it. It's kind of putting the blinders on. If we don't see it, it will go away. And
stick your head in the sand.
Yeah, stick your head in the sand, absolutely. And we know that's not true. We know that's not true. Even if your child is on a trajectory that maybe they won't live independent in their own home, apartment, whatever, there are so many experiences that people have that where a person is vulnerable to, like I said, to abuse or to situations that would be horrible for them to get into. So making sure that a child gets this information, not sticking your head in the sand, as you said, because it doesn't mean it's going to go away. And even, as I say this to parents, and I know this also for myself, that everybody has hormones. And even if a person isn't able to express verbally, they still have hormones, they have desires, they have wants. A person, a high school student or a middle school student may be in school and see, why are other kids, hanging out and kissing each other and hugging each other and holding hands? And when I did that, I got in trouble. Why? Why did I get in trouble and they can just walk down the hall going to their class and do that? So it's teaching, again, public and private and boundaries and absolutely, and consent. Consent is incredibly important to teach. Yes.
Well, and let's talk about the internet, because the internet is everywhere, and with computers in your room, with other places, how do parents control the narrative, the situation, so their child is safe on the internet? What do you recommend for that?
Right, so I was just talking with a parent about this yesterday, and the parent's inclination was, I'm just going to take all technology away. Take it away. And we talked it through, and we said, you know what? Rather than doing that, have a conversation with your teenager about, again, what are your values? What are our family values? And ask them, what is it that they are attracted to with a certain aspect of of technology or a website? We know, and have that honest conversation. And again, doing it at a level that your child can understand and participate.
Or you put controls in place.
I'm sorry,
do you put controls in place, like against certain things that maybe they shouldn't be looking at that could lead to other issues?
Absolutely. And we know that pornography is truly an epidemic. And I think it's really, it doesn't do any of us good to say, no, my child will never look at pornography, because there are so many sites where it might be like anime, which so many young folks are, and not so young folks are so interested in anime. And there are porn sites that pop up with that. So somebody's curious, oh, what is that? Or they see a body part, or they see something and, oh, okay, well, and then you go down that rabbit hole with that. So there are parent controls. There are, I attended a workshop that Catherine McLaughlin did last year, and it was, is pornography safe? Is there any quote unquote safe pornography? And that's something to really explore, to look at what is out there that would be having controls on it. There are dating sites. There's, in fact, I'm going to be meeting with a couple people in a few weeks. A mother who started a dating site called, and it's in all these different states. I think it's Find Love Safely. And there's not a chapter in Michigan, but who knows, that might happen. But there's such a need for that. And there's a need to, the fine line between letting your child experience social relationships, going out, dating if they want to do that, being in groups, but doing it in a way that there are protections put into place.
And they're safe.
Absolutely.
So just in a couple steps, if a parent is completely overwhelmed, because so many of us, and I'll put myself in there as well, I remember that time, get completely overwhelmed. You don't know what to say, where to start. What would you recommend for a parent that's feeling overwhelmed?
So I would recommend looking for resources online. I would, again, look at the Elevatus training program. There are so many resources and so much information for that. And again, that's one of many, but that just happens to be one that I feel that it's really excellent. And what I love about that, it provides factual information. So you want to provide factual information. You want to make sure your child is getting factual information. You might want to talk with somebody at your child's school. Don't assume that they're going to be receiving sexuality education training or classes, but I
want to back you up on that, because that's really important, because I've met many parents that think, oh, I don't have to do anything. The school's doing it. Mm-hmm. This is your platform. What do you tell that parent right now?
Okay, so I'm going to go back a long time ago when I was asked to head up a committee to look at developing a sexuality education program for students with disabilities in the district that I worked in. I knew nothing at that time. This is a long time ago. I knew nothing about that. But I said to my supervisor at the time, sure, I'll do it, because I had an aha moment. This is important. This is necessary. Everybody needs this information. So I had to go through much learning, accelerated learning in a very short amount of time, and then continued to learn and train, and then, eventually became a trainer and whatnot. I went down that path. But yes, do not assume that it's being done in your school. But the reason I was asked to do this, Julie, is because parents were asking the special ed director and the special ed supervisor, we need this. The health education program is great, but it's very accelerated. It's not going to give our children really what they need to prepare for going on in life, for safe, healthy adulthood.
So for a parent who, again, is just completely overwhelmed, and they think, oh, I can go to school, we're going to say, no, don't just go to school. You can ask the school for sure. But like you said, look online, look at Elevatus, look and try to find out what can you specifically do, putting your values, your morals in place. But I think having regular conversations is helpful, not just having a one and done. I've heard parents do that too.
Absolutely. In fact, I would caution against the one and done. Information is given in little increments. I know I learn best by, if you give me a recipe and there are 20 ingredients and 15 steps, I'm not going to do that because I would get overwhelmed. But if you give me just step by step, I'll be able to absorb it and then maybe tackle it. Maybe.
Exactly. So start slowly so that you're not overwhelmed. Because if you're overwhelmed, think about your child.
Exactly. And it isn't that children have to learn everything all at once. Some parents start by teaching their children just about touch and who it's okay to touch and be touched by. And that goes back to consent. That not every child has to give a big hug to Aunt so-and-so or Uncle so-and-so or Grandma or Grandpa or, your loved neighbor next door. It's important to teach children that if they don't want to, they don't have to, because that carries with them throughout their lives. And then you're reinforcing that as they get older as well.
And I would also interject, as a parent, if a child doesn't want to go to some big burly guy or Aunt Millie, whatever, don't make them.
Exactly.
It's okay.
Exactly.
It's okay.
Exactly.
Now, I had a couple questions that came in that I want to make sure that we answer. And one of them had to do with help. My neurodivergent child wants to go on a date. What do I do? How do I prepare them? How do I prepare myself? There was a lot in that one little question.
Okay. Great question. And it often does come up. So what I would say is, again, starting with what your family values are and thinking about when you were a teenager, what was important to you and how did you learn? How did you learn about relationships and dating? And, was it just incidental? You were in school, you went to events, you went to youth groups, whatever. So we want to give our kids that exposure too, not to isolate them. So letting them experience having social relationships, so important. And having those relationships, again, in a context that's safe and that's protected. But it doesn't mean that you're going to be in their back pocket with them when they go out on their first date or fifth date or 20th date. There's a really, really good video that I just was sending to somebody recently. And it's, I think it was from the Down Syndrome Council, I can't remember, but it was of two young adults with Down syndrome, and they wanted to be alone together, and there were so many people with them, and there was a picture of them in a bed, and all these people are there too. They're therapists and they're support workers and their families and and the end of the video is them like opening the door and politely asking everybody to leave, and then they had their privacy. So that made a big impression on me because you want to safeguard your children, but you also want to give them the tools to know how to advocate for themselves. And when I say speak up, again, I take into account maybe it would not be verbal speaking up.
Well, and another thing that we need to also, and this has come into play with some of the families that we work with, when your child is 18 and they're a male, we have to be very careful who they're associating with, if they're going to have a relationship with someone younger. That is so important because that's where I know you get the calls and you don't want somebody on a bad registry or things happening that affect their life.
And it happens. It happens much, much, much too often than we want it to happen. We don't want it to happen at all. So in Michigan, 16 is the age of consent, 16 years old. And there's been a lot of debate. What about people that may not be able to verbally give consent? So again, we teach other forms of communication for being able to say no and being able to see red flags as well. But that is so important to have the understanding of respecting your own body and respecting another person's body. And we don't want anybody to be on the sex offender registry because of something that was done because of their disability. Unfortunately, our legal system doesn't take into account, oh, this person has a disability, so therefore they're going to get an easier sentence or we're going to let them off. I wouldn't say it never happens, but it's something that we cannot depend on. We can't take it for granted.
Let's say that again for the people in the back, because that's really important.
We can't take it for granted that if somebody gets in trouble for something, that the magistrate or the judge or whoever is overseeing the case is going to say, oh, this person is on the autism spectrum, or this person has a genetic condition, or this person has something else. So no, we won't do anything, We have to give our children who are neurodivergent the same information. I'll say that again, this very same information as we would with any other person. We also want to dispel the myths of a person who is neurodivergent. Oh, people with disabilities will never have a sexual relationship. People with disabilities are quote unquote oversexed. People with disabilities don't understand. We work to dispel those myths as
You've
well.
heard those from probably a lot of families.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you work to dispel them and say, no, education is prevention. And I think by telling them, you don't want a court case, you don't want an issue, we don't want to bury our head in the sand, we need to maybe slowly get the information out so that they're aware of it.
Absolutely. Julie, I would highly recommend parents watch an NPR expose that was done, a series that was done in 2018 called The Sexual Assault Epidemic. I believe that's the name of it. What nobody wants to talk about. And it is, I'll say this, it is heart-wrenching. It is something that it will leave a very long-lasting impression on you. But it's so important to see how people are involved in the legal system, how people who are vulnerable and don't know how to and who to go to for support and assistance and guidance and prevention. So I would highly recommend that.
We'll get the exact name and put it in the show notes so people can look at it, because that's awesome. There's been instances even in our school district where there have been date rapes, there have been things that have happened. And with my kids, I'm always saying, if you go to a party, never put your drink down, never do this. And they laugh at me until it happened to one of their friends.
Oh.
So one of the questions for families that are really concerned about their child who maybe has communication issues and is a non-speaker, are there tools or are there ways that you recommend they help their child that is a non-speaker?
Yes, there are definitely tools. When I do the Elevators training, we have an alternative set of information that parents can access. In fact, I used that with a family last year where, in addition to sending out the lesson plans and the lessons and the information, I would send this particular parent, it was just augmentative communication. So it was further reinforcing concepts that their child, their adult or young adult child, would possibly understand in a different sense than the other curriculum. Visuals are often really, really important to use. Reinforcement of the information. Again, not hammering it away with your child, but little bits. And looking at what programs do provide alternative forms of communication. I would work also, even if you're not getting sexuality education in the schools, I would consult with the speech language pathologists, because oftentimes they are the experts of what there's available for communication. Or certainly if your child is going to get therapies outside of school and speaking with the person that they're working with.
And tools are changing all the time, so hopefully they're going to know, or a counselor you're seeing can say, here's what we know.
Absolutely.
Very helpful.
Absolutely.
Susan, thank you for coming today. I know this is going to spark a lot of questions, and we may want to have you back again.
I'd love to. Thank you.
So good. Thank you. All of this information about neurodiversity, about education as prevention, I think it is huge. And for the parents that are listening, please think of your questions. Let us know. Susan will be looking when this comes up, and we'll see what we can do to answer any additional questions.
Thank you, Julie. I would be so happy to do that. Thank you.
Thanks. For parents listening, I hope you take away not just the information, but also the encouragement that you are not alone in this. To take the next step, grab your copy of Pathway to Hope Resource Guide for Special Needs on Amazon. It's a roadmap filled with strategies, tools, and encouragement to help your family thrive. And for a personalized roadmap, check out the Hope Recovery Map on our Healing Complex Kids resource page. It guides families step by step with tailored tools and resources. And don't forget to follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, where we share more tips, stories, and updates to support you every step of the way. If you found today's episode helpful, please share it with another family who could use some hope. Together, we can make sure no family feels alone in teaching this important information. Thank you so much for joining us today. Remember, progress may be slow, but every step forward matters. And no matter where you are in the journey, there is help, there is support, and there is hope.